Good morning and welcome to Holy Trinity. It's really, really lovely to see you all here this morning on this first Sunday after Christmas, sort of officially. I know that the 26th was the first Sunday after Christmas, but we won't count that. So really good to see you. If you're visiting here, I hope that we make you feel welcome, and I hope the people around you are able to greet you at least by name. And if that's not possible, then I can solve this for you. So why don't we right now just turn around to our next door neighbours and just say our first name to them. If you're a pure part, you might have to shout and just greet them and say Happy New Year. So please go ahead and say Happy New I'm really pleased to tell you that we have a new system, which is whenever the vicar forgets to turn his microphone on, our stewards are now empowered to come up to him, slap him round the face warmly, and say, "Steve, you've forgotten to turn your microphone on," which has just happened. So isn't that great? It's our whole new year with a new way of working together. Our Christmas services were beautiful. They were full of warmth, and they were really brilliantly done, and I was so proud to be part of this church and to be part of them. We were about as full as we could be. Given that every other pew was roped off, we were about half full pretty much every single time. And so God knows exactly what He's doing in terms of getting everybody together. So that was cool. We stand at the threshold of a new year, and I'd like to ask you this question, which is, your faith, how radical do you want it to be? How all in do you want your faith to be? How fully committed do you aim to be to God? Is it too radical to say that you want to be wholeheartedly every fibre of your being, heart, mind, soul, everything? Is it too radical? Is that too crazy? Is that just a little bit too enthusiastic? I mean, after all, we are Southerners and we're Anglican and we don't do over-the-top emotion. Is that what I'm talking about? How radical should our faith be as we begin this new year? We're starting a new series looking at the Ten Commandments of God. I'm not going to make this series a possibility where I beat you over the head and make you and me feel guilty about the Ten Commandments. I want us to see how these commandments are fulfilled in Jesus, how they make total sense, how they bring freedom and liberation to our life. So this commandment, the first commandment, is you shall have no other gods before me. You should love the Lord your God with your heart, soul, mind and strength. What does that mean? Our vision as a church is to be a deeper, more vibrant, impactful and growing community. That's our vision for this year. Let's stand, I'm going to pray, and then we're going to gather in worship. Have you ever seen those old-fashioned prize, all-colours prize fights? You know, the champion rolls into the village, sets up a boxing ring, and the biggest and strongest of the men attempt to impress the ladies, earn a few coins by lasting a couple of rounds with the champion. I've only ever seen this in films, having never taken part myself, you understand. But the climax is always at the end, perhaps, when the biggest of the village heavyweights climbs into the ring to meet the reigning champion. And depending on what sort of film it is, depends on who wins. Well, I want to say this is a little bit like Matthew chapter 22, if you'll turn to it. Jesus has rolled into town, and in Matthew chapter 22, verse 15, the Pharisees, it says, get together and lay plans to trap him in his words. So it is, ding ding, round one, the Herodians step forward in verse 16, and they say, Jesus, is it right to pay taxes to Caesar or not? And Jesus deflects their question back on them and says, give to Caesar what is Caesar's, and give to God what is God's. Round one, Jesus. People hear his answer, and they start to gather. Round two, the Sadducees. They climb into the ring, verse 23. They don't believe in the resurrection of the dead, And so they set up this preposterous story about a woman who marries 7 husbands and all of them die on her. You would have thought by the time he got to the 7th husband, he would have spotted a worrying trend and aborted. But no, he does his duty and he also dies. And they ask, who will she be married to in heaven? And this time Jesus sweeps their feet from under them by saying, you really don't know the Bible, do you? People don't marry in heaven. They will be like the angels. And since, by the way, you don't believe in the resurrection, don't you see that God is not a God of dead people, but a God of living? And the crowd go wild. Verse 30, round 2, Jesus. And so we now arrive at round 3, verse 34, our passage. Hearing that Jesus had silenced the Sadducees, the Pharisees got together. Team huddle, everybody. Pharisees get together, and one of them, an expert in the law, let's wheel out our barrister, tests Jesus. He is their champion, he is their heavyweight theologian, he is the Mike Tyson of Jerusalem Bible College, and he tests Jesus with this most profound of questions. Of all the commandments, Jesus, which is the most important? Jesus, if the book that you guys are holding in your hand is the handbook of life, what is God's top instruction on how we should live? His number 1 commandment. This, by the way, is a supremely practical question for us this morning. How, in one sentence, does God want you and I to live? And I imagine the crowd hushes as they wait for Jesus' answer. And Jesus says, you want life in one sentence? Verse 37. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. This is the first and the greatest commandment. Love God. Love him with everything that you have, with everything that you are. That's what Jesus said. So life is not primarily about seeking personal fulfillment. It's not primarily about reaching our potential. It's not primarily even being kind and loving towards others. It's about loving God first. And I wonder what you make of that. And I wonder what questions that might rise in your mind. Today we begin a new sermon series looking at the 10 Commandments. How should we live based on the commandments of God, fulfilled through Jesus? And I want this to be a highly practical series. I don't want to beat you over the head with guilt. I want you to show you how love works worked out in our life, and how we experience God's grace through Jesus. And today we begin with the first commandment, the biggest, the most important, the most fundamental foundation stone we can lay when wanting to live well. God says, the first commandment, you shall have no other gods before me. Nothing and no one in front of me. No competition. I am first. Love me with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, with all your strength. And I simply want to say 3 things this morning. What does that mean? Why should we do it? And what effect does it have in our life? To love God with everything that we have. What does it mean? Why should we do it? And what impact does it have in our life? What does it mean to love God with everything that we have? To have no other gods before him? It means that there should be no other competition for love in our life. And that's quite startling. Because I think all the way through our life, we're quite used to different people and different things competing for priority in our life, for our money, for our passion, for our time. But to love God with everything is to see that this sets up no competition for us. So we experience life as different things competing for our time and our money and our affections. But God's first command is to say, stop that. Stop. There should be no race. There should be no competition. There should be nothing that competes for my affections. It's a mistake to live as if what your neighbours think about you is important. What your colleagues, or your classmates, or your friends, or society thinks about you is important. The only one who matters is God. It's his smile, his approval, his pleasure that defines you and directs you and gives you identity. So to be a Christian is not to aim at giving God most of our heart, or the majority of our mind, or large proportion of our time and talents. To be a Christian is to say, God, there is no competition. You are the only show in town. We do not live to please others, or even ourselves, but to live to please God. Now, that has to spark 1,000 difficult questions in your heart. Because we might say, well, what about our family? Can I not love my family? What about my children, or my work, or my hobbies, or my friends? Can I not love them too? And the answer is yes, absolutely. Because loving God is the context for all our other loves. Loving God is the way to love ourselves and our friends and our hobbies. Loving God, discovering God's unconditional love for us, discovering our value to Him, experiencing God's self-giving love to us, enables me to know how to love others. So loving God first and foremost does not set up competitions in our life for our affections for others. It becomes the context and the motivation and the key to love others. So there's no contradiction and there's no competition in saying, I aim to love God with everything that I am and everything that I have and everything that I will be. It's not crazy, it's supremely radical, but absolutely normal. And I want you to see that if we get this wrong, life starts to fall apart. If I love my job first, or if I love me first, or even if I love my family first, then our life begins to fracture. For I could love my job, but hate my wife. I could love my wife, but hate my neighbour. I could love myself and destroy the world. And we see all of that around us. But to love God with everything that we have and everything that we are becomes the frame and motivation to love everything and everyone. How should we live? Fundamental first step, the first commandment of God. God's number one maker's instructions as we open the Christmas present and take out this gift that God has given us. The first instructions say, no other competition, no other gods. That's what it means. So the next question is, well, why should I? Why should I love God with everything? 3 quick ideas. Firstly, because God is God. He made us. He created us. He gave us life. God holds everything together by His word of command. He is both the source and the end of our existence. Why should we love God? Because, to be honest, there is no existence outside of God. If we could somehow remove God from the universe, the very laws of nature would stop. He holds the laws and makes the laws. Everything falls apart. It will eliminate God from existence, and there is no ultimate justice. There is no ultimate right and wrong. We just all get to decide what we think is right and wrong as a community. And if we all think it's okay to exterminate a particular race, then it's okay to exterminate a particular race. But we know that can't be true. We know there has to be ultimate right and wrong. There's no hope. There's no justice at the end of our life, no ultimate meaning. Why should we love God with everything? Firstly, because He is everything. But you might be sitting there and thinking to yourself, well, Steve, that's not a good enough reason for me, to be honest. So secondly, not only He is everything, but He provides everything. God is our father and mother, our friend and brother, our lover and comfort. If our earthly parents give us identity and belonging in this world, how much more does our heavenly parent give us identity and belonging in the whole of the universe forever? If our friends share our passion and share our hopes, how much more will Jesus share our passion and give us hope? If those we love share the intimacy of our heart and the sorrow of our pain and grief, how much more will God's Spirit know us with a depth that words cannot express? Why love God with everything? Firstly, because he is everything. And secondly, he gives us everything. And you still may be sitting there and saying, well, to be honest, that also is not a good enough reason to love him with everything. So let me tell you, the third idea is the most important one. We owe him everything. Look, imagine a friend of mine comes to me and says, hey Steve, I was at your house the other day while you were in church, doing whatever you do in church, and somebody came and asked for a bill to be paid, and so I paid it for you. We won't know how to respond to them until we know how much it costs them to pay the bill. If it was just a postman asking for some unpaid postage, a few pence, then we might say to our friend, thank you, that was very kind. It won't change our life, but thank you. But if it was the bailiffs coming to foreclose on our mortgage, to repossess our home, to take all our possessions and sell them, if the bill was multiple hundreds of thousands of pounds, if our friend paid it then and there, no questions asked, isn't that a completely different matter? Until we understand how much it cost our friend to pay our debts, we will never know how much love we owe him. Until we understand how much it cost God to redeem us, we will never know how much love to give him. I don't know whether to say to God, thanks, every now and again when I remember God, or whether simply to stand there speechless, with no words to describe such an act of utter love and self-sacrifice as I see this God coming to me nailed on the cross, seeking to pay and forgive my sin. It changes the whole ballgame. Why should we love God with all our heart and soul and mind and strength? He is everything, he gives us everything, and we owe him everything. And so we say in the face of that love, God, there is no other competition for my affections. This is what it means, and this is why, and this is how it impacts us. When we place God at the centre where he belongs, when we stop trying to make life and everybody else revolve around us, suddenly everything starts to fit together. C.S. Lewis said, I believe in Christianity as I believe that the sun has risen, not only because I see it, but because by it I see everything else. When human beings try and make the world revolve around us, all the gears grind. Countries come into conflict. People come into conflict. Species go extinct. Hurt and fracture abound. It all just ends up breaking up. Why? Well, because it wasn't designed to work that way. God says, let your world revolve around me and my love. I am bigger than you, I am more glorious than you, I am wiser than you, I am more loving than you, and I give you your purpose. So when we aim to love God with everything we are, we change. Our view of other people changes, the view of our world changes. It all comes together and begins to fit. The person that we are at work is the same person that we are at home. The person we are at church is the same person we are at home. The person we are in church is the same person we are with our friends. Suddenly we see how loving God, understanding God's love for me impacts the way I want to love everybody. And I'm in it, lock, stock, and barrel. I see how loving God expresses itself in loving my husband and my wife and my children and my neighbour. I see how loving God is expressed in the way I treat the world with such care and such respect. When we aim to reflect the sun, we become like a full moon on a dark night. So loving God with all our heart and soul and mind and strength is our starting point. And I want us to be the most radical Christians on the island. I want us to say we are in this lock, stock and barrel because it is radical, but it's also completely normal. It makes us normal human beings. It just makes us radically loving human beings. And don't we want that? Will you aim for this? Will you seek for there to be no other competition in your loves? You owe him everything. He is everything. He's given us everything. And let his presence change us from inside out starting now, this year, and forever. Let's pray. Lord God, you wrote the instruction book on how to live life, and it just makes sense, and it works, but it's also true. And that truth of your incredible love for us makes us realize how valued and how precious and how beautiful we are in your sight. You esteem us. You smile upon us. You want to bless us both now and forever. And with a sense of this richness and with this grace pervading our life, help us to be radically sold out, heart, soul, mind and body for you. And may it be the most normal and natural thing as breathing, we pray.